I am now pleased to introduce you to today's speaker, Shannon Crossbear. Shannon articulates her purpose as to demonstrate and promote gentle healing. She expresses her commitment to healing through her work in the world. That work has included facilitating and consulting with the National Indian Child Welfare Association, the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health, Georgetown University, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, and participating in the Surgeon General's Conference on Children's Mental Health. Shannon has worked with tribal and non-tribal communities in creating systems of care and circles of care utilizing traditional intervention and promotion of culturally congruent and trauma-informed practices. She is skilled in trauma-informed community engagement and has worked with supporting organized stakeholder voice and representation at local and national levels through various behavioral health initiatives. Shannon, welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight.
I'm just so pleased to be able to be with you virtually. I wish I was in the great state of Connecticut tonight, but instead I'm in the great state of Minnesota. So, but I think we're going to have some time to talk about some things this evening, and I'm really glad to have the opportunity to share about the passion that I feel about family involvement and family voice in addressing substance use disorders and in being able to create a community of recovery and health. And so I'm excited to talk about that. I'm going to have you share your screen, and can I go ahead and share my screen now? Great. Tonight our subject is really about hope. It's kind of the kickoff to all of the families who are with us tonight and those that will be hopefully watching this in the future, to really introduce an opportunity for a series that's going to be happening that really is about how to turn our passion into empowerment and really to be able to find out where there is hope, how there is help, and how we can start to navigate these substance use for families in Connecticut. So I want to start here because, you know, who am I? I'm coming and talking to all of you, and it's important to say, how did I even get into this conversation, right? How did I, you know, I know when we read a bio, you hear all these things that somebody does, but it doesn't really tell you who they are or how they got to where they are or what it is about this subject in particular, families being a part of a family-driven system that really speaks to why we're in this and why we're here in this room or will be in this room in the future. So I like this picture. This is an older picture. It was taken in the 80s, and it was a picture that was taken at Thanksgiving. And pretty typical, no matter what culture you come from, there's usually the kids' table, right? So this was the kids' table. And, you know, you can see that just through the visual, I lived in a log cabin, we had limited resources, but we were happy, and for the most part, we were healthy. And we loved each other, like all families love each other, right? And I remember this. I love this picture because I think of that time, and I think of myself and my sister, and these are our children, and I think of the hope that we had for our children at that point in time. You know, everything was possibilities. Their personalities were there, and you can actually see them, you know, in this picture. And the ideas that we had, the hope and the, you know, for their lives and for what would be happening in their lives in the future. And then I look at this picture and I have to tell a different story, because as we look at this picture, you know, the story is that there are 6 children at this table. And one is no longer with us. And one died by suicide. We have 3 others at the table that suffered from substance use disorder. We have 2 at the table who are in recovery. Those are not great outcomes. Those are not the things that we hoped for to see happen with these children. And so, you know, one of the things that we have to recognize is that when people come to this work, they come with their own passion and their own pain. And they come because maybe there was something in that pain that propels them forward, right? To do something, to make it different for the future or different for the next parent that is experiencing something, and to help pave the way. But the pain doesn't keep us here. The passion keeps us here. The passion to know that things could be different and that we as family members have not only a role but a responsibility in seeing that happen. So this is another picture, fast forward, right? And this is the other side of that story. You know, this is myself and my family members, not all of them, but enough of them you get the picture. You know, we're a pretty big crew, and I like this picture because it speaks to one of the pathways among many pathways to recovery. And this particular pathway includes culture. We found that culture was something that supported the sobriety, supported recovery. And so, you know, this celebrates that and celebrates kind of the happiness that I see. But it also then, as you look at it, you can see there are young people coming up. And we need to know what their future is going to bring, right? So, you know, you can call it whatever you call it. When we define family, what do we mean by family? You know, I love this this definition that Polly gave from Family Voices, and she says, you know, call it a clan, call it a network, call it a tribe, call it a family. Whatever you call it, whoever you are, you need one. And families are big and small and extended and nuclear and multi-generational with one parent, 2 parents, grandparents, you know, and we live in one roof or many, and it can be temporary or permanent or forever. And we become parts of families by all these different ways: birth, adoption, marriage, or from a desire to, you know, just to support each other. Intentional families, right, that are created. So, and families are cultures unto themselves. They end up with their own kind of rhythm and their own understanding of things, and they have that idea of how rich that is. And we create neighborhoods and communities and states and nations. So when we're talking about families in particular for this conversation, we're really talking about families that have either experienced or are experiencing substance use disorders. And I think that's important because one of the things about our sense of belonging and knowing is that when you have a common experience, even though all the details of that experience may not be the same, you have that place where you can meet with something unknown, right? So I often think about things like, for those of you that have been to Washington, D.C., we can all say that we went to Washington, D.C., and we have that in common. And we probably have an understanding that comes with that because we've all been to Washington, D.C. But we may have seen totally different things or had totally different experiences. But we still have the common thing that we all went to D.C. And it's kind of like that with our substance use disorders and our families. We've all find these places where we have a common experience and a common understanding of what it means to have a loved one with a substance use disorder and how that impacts. So, and part of that common experience, of course, are those things like, you know, the experience that as a parent or as a caretaker, there's blame and shame with this particular disease that has happened. Some people just, we know that there is, you know, and so that keeps us isolated. And it keeps us in a place of not really being able to feel like we have a place to really talk to somebody else who is having a similar experience. And even within our systems, you know, our systems are there to help us. We still don't get that kind of, it's happening to me right now, common experience, right? So we all as families have experienced the struggle to access services. And not saying, you know, I think understanding that when we talk about access to services, we're not talking about availability of services, although that's its own challenge, right? But there's a different kind of access. There's a physical access to services, but there's also that emotional access, that access of welcoming, of feeling like this is something that's really going to speak to you and will fit. So, you know, we have that common experience. We have the fact that every system has its own language and its own understanding, and you know, it's it's alphabet soup. We had it right when we introduced this from SAMHSA. What's SAMHSA? Family members don't know what SAMHSA is. That's a funding agency, right? For those families, it stands for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So right off the bat, we have a language issue. You know? So when you're trying to navigate something, you need to be talking a similar language. Just the coordination. I'll never forget, I was working in a community action agency at one point in time. And in this particular building, in this small town in a Midwestern state, I was in this building, I was working at the community action agency, and in the same building, there was child welfare. The Department of Human Services was on the top floor. There were only 2 floors, and we were on the bottom floor. And down the hall from us was a community mental health center. And across the hall from us was a juvenile justice center. And what was really interesting to me as I worked in the community action, one of the things that we had was a food shelf, right? So people would come in for the food shelf. But I would see people sometimes in that building 4 days out of 5 of the week. And I'd be like, they're coming to this building 4 days out of the week. And what was happening was they had an appointment with DHS that they had to go to, and with the instruction that they were on assistance, they were supposed to be actively looking for work. And then they would be at the mental health center for maybe they were having some issues, mental health issues, maybe depression, and they're telling them, don't go to work because this is your first priority is to deal with this depression, and until we get that handled, don't go to work. And then they have a child who is interacting with the juvenile justice system, and if they mess up with any one of those, then they're told that they're non-compliant. Oh, they're a non-compliant person, right? They're difficult. So you see how that coordination can really affect the outcomes of that family. And there, like I said, there's that social isolation that happens because many times you're in the middle of all this and you're all by yourself. And what your goal might be is to have a Saturday night without a crisis. What the system's goals are, sobriety, employment, mental health issues, are different. And so in order to really think about addressing the family trauma, we know that we have to begin to address these things. And this is where I live in northern Minnesota. This is what winter looks like. And this is myself and one of my friends, Alan, and we're plowing through the snow because that's really what it is that, and the good news is that there's been a lot of families in different systems who have paved this way, who have paved this trail. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to be a little sloppy and a little difficult, but the good news is we have families who have paved the way about how we start to forge forward and how we start to organize and really help to inform the systems to be more helpful. So I want to give you a brief history of the family movement in behavioral health. And I'm going to say this in a couple ways because it really was in the bucket of mental health that family voice really emerged in the way that we're going to be talking about today. And then it was later that it started to emerge in other systems. Probably the first system that it ever emerged in really strongly was the educational system. But I'm talking specifically about the helping and behavioral health systems. And so really, in the early 80s, it started in Kansas around a kitchen table. Couple of moms found each other because they were dealing with the same kinds of issues. They were trying to access mental health services. And one of the things that was happening at that point in time was that in order to access certain services when the expenses of trying to deal with those mental health issues became burdensome, is that in order to access services, they would have to sign over their children to the system. They become wards of the state, even if they were still living at home. But that meant they didn't have control over what they knew was best for their children. And it was not working. And they wanted to do something about it. And so they found others and they started to have these conversations. And then in the mid-'80s, they took Barbara Huff out of Kansas, and who, by the way, if we think we're not qualified, from our own experience, Barbara was, her first job and what she was employed in was a decorator. She was a decorator, home decorator. That's what she did. And so, but Barbara came because of her pain, because of what she was experiencing, trying to access services for her daughter. And so they took Barbara and they brought her to D.C. under the understanding that she was going to be there a couple of months. And then she was there as the executive director for the Federation of Families for this first 23 years or something. So that's kind of, and why she needed to be in D.C. is that she needed to have a voice to start to inform and educate the decision makers at that federal level so that some of these laws could be changed. And some of that is still happening right now. In the process of that, they were able to advocate so strongly that the statewide family networks were funded. And the statewide family network said that every state could apply for funds for a family voice at a statewide level to do some educating, informing. It wasn't a lot of money. It's a little bit of money, but you had the ability to fund those statewide family networks. And so that was kind of the base that really allowed that family voice to really grow, because they became family organizations. And now what is happening is that we have certified family support members who are able to then support the work that they do through in some certifications through working with families directly as well, to do the things that we talked about before, to navigate, to support, to educate in a way that is really augments our partners. When we first started, there was a lot of kind of them and us thinking and mentality because we were coming from different perspectives, right? And families were saying, but we're the experts. We know the most about our children. We know that, you need to listen to us. And professionals were saying, yes, and we have this educational support, and we have this, and we know what's best, and we can, and there was that place where we had to get to our shared expertise and bringing all of that to bear in the treatment and recovery process. So everything comes from our experiences of what happens, right? So I entered into working with the Federation of Families, and I was doing a lot of work. I entered through in terms of the family work, I was entering it through the mental health door at the time. But families are messy things. And sooner or later, one of those kids was going to have an experience that had to do with substance use and get a substance use disorder. And in my work, there was a movement that was happening in terms of voices of folks, family members with a child with substance use disorder. And that was starting to emerge. And I met a friend of mine, co-director of the National Family Dialogue, Sharon Legore, and she had lost a daughter through an opioid overdose. And we were asked to come in and work with states because they were going to blend the systems. That's when the first conversations about an umbrella of a behavioral health system that included substance use disorders and mental health. And here we had these two systems and these two family voices emerging. And the family voices didn't even know each other. Like, I knew the mental health system because now I had navigated that system. But I didn't know the substance use system. So when it came time for me to navigate the substance use system, guess what? There was a different language. There was a different system. There were different concerns. It needed its own independent voice. So in 2009, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, you saw that acronym at the beginning, CSAT, they convened a meeting of family members with youth with substance use disorders. So we went through 34 states and 4 tribes showed up and said, okay, find us a family member that will come to this meeting because we need to have a conversation. And so they all, like I said, 34 states and 4 tribes came. And they had a conversation about what was happening with the system. And so the National Family Dialogue was created as a direct result of that meeting. There was a report that came out. It went to, for family members that may not know, every state has a statewide family or state authority on substance use disorders, and that so that report went out to all the state substance use state authorities, and it went out to all of the mental health program directors in each of the states. And there was a little bit of movement. They never gave any money to the families. Yeah, some of the families that participated didn't even get a copy of the report until much later. So, and yet, these were their recommendations that they were forwarding about what needed to be done to kind of start to address that. So the mission that really came out of that National Family Dialogue, because, you know, families were ready. Families were like, oh, because what happened was there was, you know, Janice in Ohio talking to Peter in Minnesota, and they were talking about what worked for them, right? And so they were exchanging these pockets of hope, these things that were actually having an effect. Oh, you started a drug take back in your community? How did you do that? Oh, we ended up having a recovery community that in our neighborhood. Oh, how did you do that? Right? And so these conversations, the National Family Dialogue, when they had that meeting, they weren't stopping. These families wanted to continue, right? And so they united, the mission was really to unite families across the nation in order to strengthen, improve, and sustain substance use disorders, right? And the recovery treatment. And that the vision was really that all youth, and we really included a lot of people in this languaging to really say what it was that we wanted to say. We really wanted everything to be there for families to be able to reclaim and maintain their health and their future. So that was really, that's one voice. So it isn't an organization, just for clarity purposes. What it is really a network of all the different organizations that we continue to grow in all parts of this country. Some of them are little mom and pop. My child had a substance use disorder, and now I want to organize to do something about it, to larger organizations that have people employed and are really working actively to at a different level. So again, I don't know, I like to throw these pictures in just to keep you guys on your toes, and to celebrate and to let you know this is actually where I'm talking from. So if you see the building behind all these beautiful young faces, that's where I'm located. That's my little office in the middle of the woods in northern Minnesota on the shores of Lake Superior. And there's a few more members of my family than when this picture was taken. But again, it really is about how do we improve it so that the picture that we take in 5 years will not only include the newest members, but there will be no one missing. So we know that, part of the issue is that there's been this challenge that I talked about a little bit earlier about across the systems, that the organized family voice has really emerged at different times and had different levels of support in terms of financial support to really be growing. And they're at different stages of development and have different levels of capacity. So I don't really know where all of you are at there in Connecticut. I do know that the National Family Dialogue can help identify those that have been involved with the National Family Dialogue from Connecticut, or those that may have been involved in other things that we know about. But really knowing that it doesn't matter where you're starting, just the fact that you're having this opportunity, this is great because you're having this opportunity within the next few sessions to really do this kind of work, to really build your voice and build your capacity to do the work. And we know that each of the child serving systems has different levels of how they're implementing family involvement, and they have some different definitions of what they mean by family involvement, family driven, family engaged. These are all languages that systems use, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I want to reiterate this because it's so important that all of you understand really what it means as a family member. If family members are on this call, they'll know this just in their experience, that if you're involved with one system, your likelihood of being involved with other systems is pretty high. And what you don't see on this is the substance abuse system is at 21, I think, and over the mental health system, no, the mental health system was 21. The substance abuse system was 23%, and everybody experienced trauma. So what we did was we did a little survey, and we had just amazing response. Like, we put it out to families. We gave them like a week to respond, and we got well over 345 respondents, which is unheard of. And they were saying that the average number that we came up with was over 3 systems that they were involved in. And yet those systems weren't talking to each other. So, of course, the one thing that they have in common is the family, right? So all these systems have the family involved. And what we found was that how important it was to be trauma informed. You can just imagine when we talked about earlier, just the trauma that families are coming in with. What was interesting is a number of years ago at a federation conference where there was well over 900 participants, we did a survey, and the question we were asking families was, did you experience trauma prior to your intersect with any one of these systems? And what was your experience of trauma after intersecting? And what we found was that people actually were traumatized by the systems themselves, by the processes that they had to go through, by the telling their stories over and over and over again, and just all of that happening. So we want to really be knowing that that is part of what we have to address for all of us. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Shannon, let's go back to that one for a minute. Thank you, Shannon. Shannon was just pointing out what these acronyms were: substance abuse, mental health, child welfare, physical health, education, and juvenile justice. Thanks. So, when we think about the roles that families play, we talk about it in some different ways. On an individual level, when we're talking about family involvement, engagement, or driven, on the treatment level, we're talking about you being involved in the process of treatment and recovery. But when we're talking about peer support in families, which is so critical, we're really talking about this list of parent support groups, being able to share your life experience, providing peer navigators. I cannot tell you how much that has meant to me in my life when I was dealing with someone to ask a question like, one really good example is that my youngest son, who was in treatment, he was going to be leaving treatment and going into a 3/4 way house. And I talked to another parent who could only tell me from their perspective what their experience was. And it was so important because in the treatment facility that my son was attending, they were using one model around recovery. And in the 3/4 way, they used a different model. And in some ways, those two models were conflicting. And if you didn't know that ahead of time and you couldn't prepare yourself or prepare your loved one for that, that could potentially lead to some bad outcomes. And so it was really, really important to have that perspective of that other family to help coach me into the next steps. needs and how I could be most supportive. The resources, being able to provide training and educate the public and the policymakers and do the kind of advocacy work that we talked about. And I want to just differentiate for a minute between advocacy and leadership. Because advocacy really is something that is required to put something on the table. You advocate to make sure that people are paying attention to something. But there's the next step, and that's the leadership step. That's where you have to marshal the resources in order to address the issue. And so there's room for both of those things. In the early days, we were literally kicking down doors to get to the table, and when the time came that we were at the table, we needed a new set of skills. And that's what's exciting about this series, is that you will be given a new set of skills to kind of do that work. So, elevating your current family involvement. If you don't know where you're going, you probably don't know where, if you don't know where you're at, you probably don't know where you're going. So, maybe taking some time to assess where you're at with family involvement and in your state, in your community, in your agency, and to see where you are. There's a lot of great tools out there that can help you to kind of take a look at that, okay? Plan on where you're going, identify your partners, who else might be willing to partner with you. And if you are an agency, you have to really create a plan for involvement in families. It's not enough just to say, yes, we all agree, but you really have to have a concrete plan moving forward. So I wanted to talk I think this is probably one of the best things since sliced bread when it comes to families and substance use and support, and being able to really have a great model that is working. And it really is the CRAFT model, which is the community reinforcement and family training. And it was developed by Drs. Robert Myers and Jane Smith, and it really teaches you as a family how to positively affect your loved ones. While you can both not detach and not confront, and I'm so glad I see in the chat box that CRAFT is going to be offered to families again. And if you're a family member, this will soothe your soul and help you in lots of great ways. What's even better is it's really been proven now to really be effective in engaging loved ones in treatment and decreasing substance abuse. And how that might be different than it has in the past, as there's been so much shame and guilt, and you got to be hard, and you got to be tough, and you got to, kick them out on the streets, or, this is really about the science. And I want to say that again. It's not airy-fairy. I want to say it again. It's the science of kindness. And we know there are things that work now. So this is just a little more about community reinforcement and family training and what it's designed to do. And it sounds like it's either coming in this, you'll hear a little bit more about it in this series, but also the training is coming to your state. So if you're a family member, I'm just going to encourage you about how it really, I think this last bullet point is the most important. It improves the lives of the concerned family and friends. You are under so much stress that in this process, that this is, if we can get to the point where we improve our lives, where we're not constantly in this trauma after trauma after trauma experience, then to me it's doing a remarkable thing. So again, it's all about just leads right into this. It's so important to take care of yourself. Now, if you're here and you're a family member and you have a child that's struggling with a substance use disorder, then we know you're already in so much stress. You know, it's a difficult, challenging, tear your heart out kind of experience. You got worries, there's always something going on, the frustration, and there's a feeling of helplessness. That's what's good about craft, because you understand that you're not helpless. You actually have some things that you can do, and that's exciting to learn and to really have that concentration on yourself and you taking care of yourself. So I just, and that looks different to everybody, right? Self-care looks different. It's things to really fortify your mind and your body and your soul. It's not healthy to live in panic mode, and you can't afford not to take care of yourself, because it's not just your loved one, it will be you, right, that suffers. So and I think everything that we need, our families need, right? So when we think about support, what kind of support do families really need? Well, mentally, what do we need? We need information. We need accurate information, education that really takes care of our needs and our mental way of dealing with substance abuse. We need physical health. We need access, physical access, but also access to treatment. That physical, maybe it's medicated assisted treatment that we have to learn about mentally, but we also have to physically be able to have access to that. Emotionally, to take care of ourselves. And spiritually, not talking religion here, I'm just talking from your heart, spirit, about how you feel when you get up every morning and you have to face another day. Is it with that feeling of connectedness or disconnect? So I'm just going to skip this one, although don't they all look like models or rock stars? But there's one young man in there that has now 8 years of sobriety, so that's exciting. So really, when I was talking about culture, it's just really the opportunity we have to really change the culture of health and what we want to see happen as family members, as members of a community, as helpers, that we want people to feel like they can access help when they need it, and that it doesn't matter what system that they come through, that they're actually they're accessing health services. And finding a way that we start to invest in prevention, knowing what works. And we have some information about what works now, so we can start to employ those things. But we want to see those healthcare professionals, I don't care whether they're working in the field of substance use disorders or working in another field, that they have the same level of compassion and care that they would for any other chronic disease. That we start to really, how long? It's been, I think, that changed in the 1970s, early 70s, where they, in the diagnostic tool, they changed substance use to be alcoholism precisely to be a disorder, a disease. But we have still, since that time, even though it had been described as that, is included in a diagnostic tool, we still don't treat it like we treat any other disease. So when we get to the point where we actually celebrate people to get care and their steps in recovery, that it really, we will have changed the system. So just, again, everybody has a role to play in accessing substance use. Whoever you are, you have a role to play in this process. So I know that some of this is kind of a repeat, but understanding how important it is that you really find your partners and you reach out beyond the substance use world into the social services, child welfare, all the educational systems, that all of these are partners in this process. And so finding ways to engage your partners. And if you're family members, you're working in these fields. Some of you are. right? So this is because this is about all of us. So I always talk about aiming for the 4 C's, that you really represent your constituency, meaning the families that are in Connecticut, and that you have credibility in the community. And what does that mean? That means if you say you're going to be someplace on Monday and you're going to hold a support group, that you're there. And that you're there every Monday, even on the Mondays that no one shows up. Because that credibility, the first time somebody comes to your door and you're not there, you've lost credibility. And your capacity to engage others. And most importantly, your commitment to difficult work. It's not going to be easy. This is not an easy thing, but it's so rewarding to see the outcomes when things come together. So these are some places, some resources, and you do have access to these PowerPoints. The first is around the craft model that I spoke about. Other great people to work with is the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids. Great, they have parent helplines, parent coaches, parent education, and they have community presentations that you as a family member can actually go in and say, hey, I want to talk to my, whatever your group is, if it's a church group or if it's a neighborhood group, I want to talk to them about something, right, that has to do with drug-free kids. Maybe it's on a certain presentation that you want to do, informing people about what it means to have medicated assisted treatment. You can go and get a presentation free from the drug-free kids, and you can have that to help guide you in doing a community presentation. There's a National Family Dialogue that I spoke about, and one that I didn't speak about, but there are additional resources that were provided. There was an infographic that is provided on this, is the Family-Run Executive Directors Leadership Association. So what happened was you had these family organizations that grew, right? And now they really needed to have some leadership. Parents didn't necessarily know how to be executive directors, right? And now there's these organizations. And so this is really a place to really help family organizations as they're growing to become organizations, and how they can do that in different systems and what's available. So great people, again, family run. So those are great resources for you. So, I'm winding up now, so I see I'm out of time. But to just know that recovery is possible, that you can find your role, respect yourself and others, nurture yourself and others, and rest, because, like I said, it's not always going to be easy. In addition to the infographic from Fredla, I also included a PowerPoint that is on the definition of family-driven and the National Family Dialogue. That's pretty self-explanatory, so you have that. And I also provided you with something called a balance wheel. I want to just go back to what I was saying about how important it is to take care of ourselves and looking at our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So it's a little assessment that you can do. It's fun. You get to color, and maybe you can make some decisions about going forward about how you're going to take care of yourselves in the future. So I invite you. I'm so excited for all of you. I want to hear what happens as a result of this series and of the work that you're doing to make lives better for those generations to come. Thank you.